Attention! On September 1st, 2025, a Ukrainian MiG-29 flew 350 kilometers into occupied territory to destroy a Russian factory producing 40 Shahed drones per week. 4 US-made GBU-39 bombs pierced through the most feared air defense on the planet and leveled the complex. Now the question is, was this a legitimate act of defense or a dangerous escalation that could directly pit NATO against Russia? Subscribe if you believe Ukraine did the right thing by striking the heart of Russian drone production, or leave a comment if you think this attack only brings us closer to a larger war. At 14:45 local time on September 1st, 2025, a Ukrainian MiG-29 from the 41st Tactical Aviation Brigade made a sharp left turn when its weapon interface began issuing voltage warnings, even though up to that moment the flight toward the Russian drone factory had been routine. Everything would change within seconds. His radar warning receiver suddenly blared. An S-300 acquisition radar had detected him 95 kilometers away. The pilot dropped down to 500 feet, using the terrain to mask his approach, while the weapons began their startup sequences. Each GBU-39 bomb needed to acquire GPS signal, calibrate its inertial navigation system, and verify communication with the improvised interface. The process was supposed to take 30 seconds. 2 minutes had already passed. At 14:48, the 4 bombs finally showed green lights. On his iPad, the target coordinates appeared. A drone facility located 350 kilometers inside occupied territory, producing 40 Shahed 136 drones per week. Intelligence reported that a Kushuka-4 electronic warfare vehicle was protecting the site with 500 watts of GPS jamming. The pilot checked fuel. He had 2,100 kilometers of range left. After releasing the weapons, he would have exactly 18 minutes over hostile territory before critical fuel forced him to return. The S-300 radar intensified its search pattern, now joined by an SA-15 system tracking from the southeast. In 6 minutes, he would need to climb to 15,000 feet for weapon release, exposing himself to every air defense system in the sector. From that altitude, the GBU-39s could glide 110 kilometers. But first, they had to survive the climb through electromagnetic interference powerful enough to fry even the toughest commercial electronics. Suddenly, a voltage spike of 31 volts lasted 3 seconds before the regulator stabilized it. The adapter pylons carrying the bombs were pulling 32 amps through circuits designed for 20. Somewhere in that improvised wiring maze, Ukrainian field engineers were battling against Soviet electrical standards to control US weapons. Pilots shoved the throttles forward. Both RD-33 engines roared back with 18,300 pounds of thrust each as he crossed into the contested zone at 1451. Every threat receiver lit up simultaneously. S-400 radars from Melitopol, mobile SA-15 units on intercept course, and the first signs of Kushuka jamming flooding GPS frequencies. In 19 minutes, he would find out if 4 precision weapons, strapped under Soviet wings with recycled tank parts, could survive the most sophisticated air defense network outside Moscow. At 15:15, the pilot banked right into the 8-kilometer corridor left between overlapping S-300 coverage zones. The route, plotted by Ukrainian intelligence, required flying between 2 mountain ranges for the next 7 minutes. He hugged the terrain to stay below radar horizon, slowly creeping toward the target. A single navigation error would place him squarely in the sights of an SA-15. The corridor existed only due to physics. The S-400 near Melitopol could not see below 800 feet at that distance because of Earth's curvature. The S-300 batteries had their radars angled to defend against high-altitude threats, creating dead zones at very low levels. But this passage demanded extreme precision. Veer 2 kilometers left, and he'd be under the western S-300. 3 kilometers right meant death by an SA-15 patrol. At 15:18, his radar warning receiver showed new activity. A mobile SA-15 had stopped. Its operators, likely suspecting the gap in coverage, powered up their 9 S-36 search radar, hunting for exactly what the pilot was doing, exploiting their deployment's weakness. He descended further, now flying just 400 feet above a dry riverbed, his fuselage skimming over power lines absent from mission imagery. At 1522, the pilot pulled a 4G climb up to 15,000 feet. His radar receiver lit instantly as multiple fire control radars locked on. The S-400's gravestone radar punched through Ukrainian countermeasures with 350 watts, bathing the MiG in enough electromagnetic energy to physically heat its radome. He had exactly 90 seconds left to reach the release point before entering S-400 missile range. Their 48 N-6E missiles could reach him in 24 seconds. Timing was critical. 45 minutes earlier, Ukrainian Su-24s had launched anti-radiation missiles at radars near Tomak, forcing them to shut down temporarily. Electronic warfare units pumped false returns, simulating an attack from the northwest, diverting defensive focus as the lone MiG approached from an unexpected vector. Every element of the mission had been choreographed to create this 90-second window. Leveling at release altitude, his instruments showed 12 minutes of fuel for the return. The GBU-39s performed final checks. GPS receivers tracking 5 satellites with 3-meter accuracy, coordinates locked. The tactical screen showed the nearest SA-15 battery 41 kilometers southwest, out of range but close enough to react if he delayed. S-400 emissions indicated the battery preparing to fire, but physics dictated their missiles would arrive 30 seconds after weapon release. The Kushuka-4 near the target had been jamming GPS for 10 minutes, flooding L1 and L2 frequencies with 500 watts of noise. Essentially, the Russians were dirtying GPS signals to blind any aircraft relying on satellite navigation, but none of it would matter. In 60 seconds, he would discover if U.S. engineers had truly designed the GBU-39 to operate in the world's harshest electronic warfare environment. The fate of Ukrainian civilians, dependent on stopping those drone attacks, now rested on 37 kilograms of explosives and the electronics guiding them through the invisible storm ahead. At 1528, the pilot released the first GBU-39. The plane jolted as the 250-pound bomb dropped from the right pylon. His GPS receiver instantly registered massive interference across all channels, and within 200 milliseconds, the guidance computer logged an unacceptable signal-to-noise ratio, switching seamlessly to inertial navigation. The Kushuka-4 operators, 82 kilometers away, had no way of knowing their jamming had just become useless. 6 seconds later, he released the second bomb from the left pylon, then the third from centerline, and finally the fourth. Each deployed its wings 2.7 seconds after release, transforming from ballistic projectiles into guided gliders with a 20-to-1 lift-to-drag ratio. Their computers plotted optimal routes to converge on the target from different angles, preventing any point defense system from intercepting all 4 at once. They would glide 89 kilometers through contested airspace, arriving 30 seconds apart to maximize destruction with sequential detonations. The pilot inverted and dove in a 5G maneuver back to the deck. His sensors showed SA-15 radars switching to tracking mode as operators finally realized what was happening. The nearest battery fired 2 9M9 missiles at 15:29:15, but intercept math showed they'd arrive 45 seconds after the MiG vanished behind terrain. Physics and geometry had already decided the outcome. The missiles would chase a target hidden in ground clutter before reaching it. Meanwhile, the GBU-30s flew at 180 meters per second, updating navigation 20 times per second, cross-checking accelerometers with stored terrain references in hardened memory. When GPS signals briefly pierced through at 15:31, the bombs updated positions, confirming they were still within an 8-meter margin of the planned route. Inertial navigation had held accuracy despite the world's fiercest electronic warfare environment. The first bomb acquired its target at 15:32:44 using its uncooled infrared seeker. The metal roof radiated heat differently than surrounding structures, creating a thermal signature the algorithm identified with 94% confidence. It adjusted final trajectory with tail fin corrections to strike at a 68-degree angle for maximum penetration. The second bomb hit 28 seconds later in the electronics workshop, where Iranian guidance systems were programmed for specific missions. Without this capability, completed drones became little more than model aircraft incapable of precision strikes. The blast punched through the reinforced roof, detonating among tables filled with circuit boards, laptops, and programming gear. The shock wave shredded delicate electronics, while shrapnel tore through what remained. The third GBU-39 struck at 15:33:41 in the warehouse, where intelligence estimated 15 to 20 Shahed 136 drones sat ready. Each drone carried 40 kilograms of explosives, causing a massive secondary blast that destroyed not only the stock, but the entire logistical chain for drone operations in the southern sector. Fuel, spare parts, and maintenance gear worth millions of rubles went up in flames. The fourth bomb finished off what was left. The Kushuka 4 operators realized their jamming had failed when explosions shook the complex. Their system had functioned exactly as designed, saturating GPS frequencies. But the GBU-39s had been built to defeat brute force Soviet-style electronic warfare. U.S. engineers, after decades studying Russian capabilities, had embedded countermeasures into every circuit. Now, though, the pilot had to return, and the Russians wouldn't allow it. At 15:34, he leveled at 400 feet with 750 kilograms of fuel left. His tactical computer showed 180 kilometers to Ukrainian airspace, 12 minutes of optimal flight. Behind him, secondary explosions sent 900-meter smoke columns skyward as stored munitions and fuel added to the destruction. The MiG-29's threat receiver instantly picked up multiple SA-15 missile launches. The projectiles, with high-speed guidance, accelerated to Mach 2.8, closing fast. Yet, the pilot had one key advantage. He flew at very low altitude on a carefully planned path exploiting terrain. Ahead, a deep river valley stretched along his escape route. This natural formation would block tracking radars, forcing the missiles to lose lock within seconds. Calculations showed just 45 seconds for terrain to sever line of sight, rendering guidance useless and forcing missiles to self-destruct. Russian air defense commanders scrambled 2 Su-35 fighters from Barents Air Base to intercept the retreating MiG-29. But tactical conditions worked against them. Based on speed and trajectory, the interceptors would need 8 minutes to reach the MiG's estimated position. By then, the Ukrainian fighter would have already closed the gap to its own airspace by 75 kilometers. Although these Su-35s carried R-77 air-to-air missiles capable of long-range kills, the situation posed a technical obstacle. The MiG-29 was flying extremely low, about 400 feet above ground, using terrain masking to evade detection. Combined with electronic interference saturating the area, the Su-35's radars struggled, locking onto a fast-moving target that low, buried in ground clutter, exceeded their effective capabilities at that moment. The pilot chose to stay on course at low altitude, fully aware that even a slight climb would make him a visible target. He kept skimming at 400 feet, constantly adjusting altitude to terrain and exploiting every natural cover available. At 15:38, after minutes of nap-of-the-earth flight, he crossed the Malachna River, heading southwest toward the Sea of Azov. This point wasn't just a landmark, it was crucial to mission planning. The terrain there created natural masking that drastically limited Russian radar coverage. The SA-15 batteries lost lock, and their missiles self-destructed. The Su-35s kept chasing, but fuel constraints would soon force them to break off. Post-mission analysis delivered key strategic insights. Telemetry confirmed the GBU-39 bombs maintained navigation accuracy within just 12 meters of deviation, despite operating under continuous high-intensity GPS jamming. This validated U.S. claims of their resilience in complex electronic warfare scenarios. By contrast, the Russian Kushuka 4 system had done exactly what it was designed for, flooding GPS with noise. Yet the results showed such measures couldn't neutralize weapons specifically engineered to counter Soviet origin and modernized EW capabilities. And so, in under 15 minutes, a single Ukrainian aircraft pierced Russian air defenses, outsmarted electronic warfare, and destroyed one of the pillars of its drone industry. A surgical strike some hail as a strategic victory, and others condemn as a dangerous provocation that could push the world closer to a far larger war. The question remains on the table: was it a necessary act to protect Ukrainian lives, or a reckless gamble with unpredictable consequences? Leave your opinion in the comments, because this debate is only just beginning.